Like a hamster.
It's a hamster running on the treadmill, and we are live right now.
Boom.
We'll give everybody a couple minutes to jump in here. The email notifications are going out that we are live.
Oh, cool.
I'm pulling up Twitter over here. I'll have it open. I got the comment box open. Everybody tuning in. I'm Scott.
I'm Bart.
We are the Scotch Test Dummies, and joining us tonight are...
I am Joshua Hatton.
Yep. I'm Jason Johnston, Single Cask Nation.
Joshua, go ahead and introduce yourself again. I had the camera locked on me.
Oh, right. I am Joshua Hatton. How did that work? Still locked on you?
Oh, you're good. He'll do that. He likes to lock the camera on himself whenever possible.
Wow.
That's right.
He is the most good-looking here, so I can see why.
There you go. He'll say that again for him. That'll please him.
Jason and Joshua are from the Single Cask Nation. We'll talk about their role, their company, independent bottlers. We have a 9-year-old English Whisky Company that was aged 9 years in first fill Sauternes Barriques casks.
Boom.
Bottled at 61.8%. We've got a sample of a Glentauchers 8-year-old second fill sherry cask, bottled at 58.1%. Mm-hmm. And we also have Jason and Joshua are responsible for the annual Jubilee from this. I believe this is this year's whiskey from actually an exclusive to the Whiskey Jubilee. It's an American light whiskey, 8 years old.
I said that was not this year's. Joshua, which year is it from?
Yeah, this was our first Chicago festival bottling, so that would have been from 2015.
Wow. Well, I shouldn't have opened it then. I should have collected this bottle.
Oh, wow, secondary price would have been great on
that. Kill him. He opened the Compass Box General, and he's still wishing he hadn't.
So anyway, this one's an 8-year-old. It's finished in a beer barrel. You guys put plainly on the label, distilled by Midwest Grain Products.
Yep.
And it's bottled at 65.1%. Bart, what are we going to do?
Well, before I scream out the catchphrase, we should also just have a moment of silence for the Lafroig that did not survive the journey.
That is right. Yeah, I forgot about that. We had a sample bottle that broke in transit. Joshua, describe that one?
Well, currently it's a shame. But before it was a shame, it was a 10-year-old single cask Lafroig, and really on the lighter, brighter, fruitier, sweeter style of Lafroig. It would have been so good in your mouth.
Oh, you're killing me here. Yeah.
It smelled good.
Oh, yeah. Scott calls and says, hey, all's good. We lost one. I go, as long as it wasn't anything peated. And he goes, well, and I'm like, shut it up.
Yeah, bad news on that front. But you'll both be happy to hear, though, that I did personally chastise Joshua when we were in Kentucky together on Friday. So I did. I took the birch to his back.
Oh.
So Bart, what are we going to do?
We're going to test it.
Let's test it.
See, there you go. They're like, wow. They're like, we came on this show. They're like, what was that?
That's awesome.
Introduce us to the Single Cask Nation. Tell us a little bit how you guys got started. You guys are the owner, operator, founders.
All of the above.
Yep.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead, Jason?
2011, I think, wasn't it, when you guys started?
We did. So Joshua, we actually just celebrated an anniversary the other day. Joshua called me Thanksgiving Day of 2010 and said, I've got a crazy idea. Tell me that it's too crazy. And I had an inkling what he was going to say, and he said, I want to start an independent bottling company. And I said, that's brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. You should absolutely do that. And he said, and I'd like you to be my partner in that. And I said, oh, that's huge. And so I went in. We were in Palo Alto at my sister-in-law's house for Thanksgiving. And I walked into, I told my wife, I think I just had a life-changing conversation with Joshua. And first of all, she made sure I wasn't leaving her. And and then when that was crystal clear that I was in it to win it. She said, "Well, I will support that whiskey journey however I can." And so when we first came together to actually discuss the idea deeper than that, there's a great story that I always tell, which is my wife is Jewish, and she was coming over to Scotland one Christmas, New Year to meet my family. And my mum took me to the side and she said, "Tamara's coming to visit." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Tamara's Jewish." And I said, "Yes, she is." And my mum said, "What will we talk about?" And I thought that was a very peculiar thing for anybody to say. But I said, "We're Scottish. We'll probably talk about the weather." And lo and behold, we talked about the weather and everybody was hunky-dory. But when Josh and I were thinking about bringing together Single Cask Nation, and really, it's under the Jewish Whisky Company, but Single Cask Nation is the independent bottling portion. And so when we started talking about this nation, it was really about building a community. And one of the things that was hugely important to us was giving people something to talk about. And so if Jewish folk came up because of the Jewish whiskey connection, if people came, whiskey lovers came just because of the independent bottling connection, we wanted them to always have something to talk about. And whiskey is one of the best things to talk about. It's why we're gathered together this evening. You can always talk whiskey with a fellow whiskey lover and not worry about any other complications. So that was really the impetus for us. Out of that came whiskey tours. We call Whiskey Geek Tours. Out of that came the Whiskey Jewbilee, of which we'll be having a festival bottling tonight. And so now we've even got these communities in New York, Chicago, and Seattle, where we've got a full kosher buffet, which some people have never had kosher food before. Mm-hmm. And one of the great comments that we get out of Seattle at the Jubilee is people say, "Wow, I never knew kosher food could be amazing." It's like, well, technically it's food. So, food can be amazing.
And it's blessed.
So it's just these kind of, it's funny, I was actually just shopping at Costco this afternoon, and this wonderful African-American woman at the register who'd been helping, she takes my credit card and she says, "Well, I've never heard of a Jewish whiskey company." And I said, "Well, you have now." And so it was just this brilliant kind of starting point for a conversation that was very easy. And really that's what we've been doing since we first had the conversation in 2010, established 2011, memberships 2012. It's just nonstop all the bloody time. Right, Joshua?
Yes, indeed.
So,
Joshua,
Joshua,
there's a lot to get done.
Joshua, how do you, what brings you and Jason together? How are you guys friends, relatives?
Right.
Cohorts?
It had nothing to do with J-Date. I can tell you that.
See?
Jason and I we really started everything through whiskey blogging. Mm-hmm. Back in 2007 or 2008, somewhere around there, I actually was following Jason's blog, which at the time was whiskeyhost.com, and then it became Good Scotch Drink, GUID Scotch Drink, and now it's some Malaysian sports betting site.
I'll tell you where the money is.
But I started reading his blog, and it gave me inspiration to start my own blog. And he was pretty active on Twitter. I was active on Twitter as well, and we hit it off there. And us both being bloggers, we said, well, let's share samples. We weren't receiving a ton of samples from companies. It was us spending our own money. And what easier way to be able to post more about whiskeys, sharing samples with people. And so we started that way, and we'd get on the phone and talk, and it's just, we figured out we were very much alike, and laughed at the same things and had similar palates, etc. And the friendship just sort of blossomed from there.
It's one of those interesting things, though, that when we look back, when Joshua and I had that conversation about starting a company together in 2010, we'd actually been friendly for 6 months. So as much
Yeah.
as he could read me and I'd started reading him, we'd actually been friendly for 6 months, and we set out to launch a company together, which only in looking backwards at it does that seem insane. And yet here we are, just celebrating 7 years since that very first conversation about the company. And
That is awesome. Yeah, Scott and I have known each other for like 22 years, and he still questions like partnering with me. He would have preferred he only knew me 6 months. He'd at least have an excuse, like I didn't know. I had no idea it was going to be like this.
And that might be the truth of the matter, right? At 6 months in, it would it seemed like a great idea.
So in 2010, the idea is hatched. Let's do this.
Yeah.
When does the first bottle become available for sale?
Yeah, so the intention that we had was that bottlings would hit the US and we'd be able to sell it through our website in 2011. And, we spent a lot of time just trying to figure out the US 3-tiered system, which is a goddamn nightmare. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with 50 states, which may as well be 50 countries, some of them very foreign. So it took us a while just to figure that out. And then after selecting casks, getting them bottled, getting them labeled, shipping over here, they finally arrived. We'd gotten some advanced bottlings late in 2011. Is that correct? Am I remembering correctly?
Yep, no, that's right. Everything kind of bogged down and slowed down. And so, we debuted at our own whiskey festival, which is how every independent bottler should do it. It was very nice to kind of welcome ourselves at the Jubilee, and then we poured at Whiskey Fest, New York.
Well, I saw that where the Jubilee came out because Whiskey Fest had switched to a Friday and Saturday, so they were on the Sabbath.
Exactly.
So, they gave you guys permission full-heartedly. Hey, have one that's not on the Sabbath, and I'd read that.
Yeah, it was interesting to actually have as many industry people reach out to us as Jewish Whisky Company and say, "Are you guys going to fill this void here? Are you guys going to make something available?" And we talked about the possibility of it later on. You wouldn't launch both an independent bottling company and a whiskey festival at the same time. That just seems like a terrible idea. And it is. However, needs must. Within 4 weeks, we'd planned the first Whiskey Jubilee.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it really only came together because of the industry support that we had with those people who had said, you got to do something. And just to think that we've got 3 festivals out of that, 3 major cities covered with that. And we get emails all the time. You'll bring it to LA, bring it to, who was the one last week? Orlando, Florida. Somebody dropped us an email. Bring it to Orlando, Florida. You'll have a great attendance. It's like, yeah, well, so will Atlanta, so will Boston, so will Dallas, so will LA.
Wichita, Kansas. That's
right.
all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're just thinking, yes. An old cow town in the middle of the country. Boom.
See, that's what we're missing, right?
That's right. There's some poor Jewish folks here that are like, we need this right now.
Well, it's funny because my mind immediately, the whiskey isn't the issue. My mind immediately goes to the kosher food.
Yes.
And even in Seattle, when we did our first event in Seattle, we had 3 kosher caterers to choose from. And in our second year in Seattle, only 1 of them remained. And thankfully, it's the one we chose year 1.
Wow.
And so Leah's catering is just brilliant. But she flies all of our kosher stuff in from New York City. So, when we do our New York Jubilee and it's kosher and Ari White is amazing there. all of his access points for kosher food are the same access points for our caterer in Seattle. So yeah. So if we maybe I shouldn't say if, I'll say when we come to Wichita, Kansas,
Yes.
We'll also be flying our kosher food in from New York.
Now
you get a crowd just for that alone. They'll be like, and whiskey?
Oh, yeah.
Jason, are you coming to us from the warehouse, or is that your office?
This is my office.
That is a nice office.
Cheers.
There's a lot of coveting.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
He keeps telling me that we're selling a lot of bottles. I think I've figured out what they've all ended.
That's right. It's a scam. Now I've been nosing this first one, Joshua, that you wanted us on. What we should talk about.
Oh, the Glentauchers, yeah. I know I sent you guys a sample bottle, but here's the label itself. I don't know if my video is popping up front there, but
yep, for me.
8-year-old Glentauchers, and there's the details on it. So I actually, what's funny is there's an issue with the label. It says it spent 8 years in a refill sherry cask, and actually it's 8 years in a second fill sherry cask, where refill would usually be third use and after that. So, Glentauchers is one of those distilleries that few, if any, people have heard of. They don't really have their own bottling. The only official bottling is actually through Gordon MacPhail, because they have the licensing for a label. So if you see an official Glentauchers bottling, it's actually an independent bottler doing it. So yeah, Glentauchers, they're owned by Pernod Ricard. This whiskey just tends to end up in Chivas Regal.
Beautiful nose.
Yeah.
Well, I don't get any of the sherry per se on the nose. I get a lot of malt and a lot of lemongrass.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said malt, because that's what Glentauchers is known about. If you're not getting a massive hit of malt, then I'd question the quality of that Glentauchers cask.
Yeah, I was in, what would have been September of 2016. I was leading a whiskey tour of Scotland. I had a good group in from Seattle, and we're in Elgin at a place called the Druthy Cobbler, which is a really nice establishment that they've now opened up there. And as is the way on all of my tours, the people sit down in a bar and they say, "Okay, Jason, what am I drinking tonight?" And I say, "Okay." I look over the menu. I'm like, I know exactly what I'm starting this group on. And there was a really nice mid-90s Glentauchers bottled by Gordon MacPhail on their shelf. And so I got glasses for the table, and we sent it around, and every single person who have great whiskey collections of their own, none of them had heard of Glentauchers. And every single one of them loved the example that was in front of them. And they then, for the rest of the week, every single bar we went into in Scotland, they asked for Glentauchers. And so when we moved from the online model into our first retail release, having the opportunity to bottle a Glentauchers of our own was hugely exciting. And as you rightly say, Scott, this wonderful malt presence on it, I think, is so true to the Glentauchers distillery style, that if people like this and they then go looking for other Glentauchers, I think they'll understand what the distillery does and where other bottlings then bounce off of that. So really happy with it.
I went ahead. I just took a little sip there while you was talking. Bart,
right.
Bart, did you get anything different on the nose?
No, you called it. I was getting that citrusy and then that maltiness. I've told you before, and I mentioned I lived or worked right in Golden, Colorado, near the Coors distillery or brewery distillery, and I remember like a blizzard coming in December, and they were just at a full run, and you could smell that malty this brewery kind of rolling all through the area, and I get a touch of that deep in.
Nice. I'm also glad you said lemongrass, and we're clearly not in the same place, because this afternoon I put a Thai green chili into my crock pot, And so the lemongrass notes from my crock pot are rather overwhelming. And so I'm glad you confirmed there's lemongrass in there. It's not just coming from my crock pot.
Well, that chili you sent was good. No, definitely some lemongrass in there. I mean, it's beautiful, crisp.
You know, on the palate, the sherry is there's just a slight bit of the sherry comes through.
Yeah.
Just a nice creamy, buttery palate with it. Those citrus notes as well, and the maltiness.
Beautiful spark right at the beginning too. Nice and creamy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that Jason and I really look for when we're selecting a cask. I mean, obviously, it has to smell great. It has to taste great. You know, you want the flavors to linger. But if it is thin and hot on the palate, then, you know, you're losing probably the best part of the experience. You know, it has to. It's like drinking a beer that's just too damn watery, right? You want something that has a bit of presence to it, and that's what we look for, that nice creamy or oily or viscous mouthfeel.
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful mouthfeel, real velvety. And it definitely like portrays that substance even in the finish as it just lingers and kind of tails out real smooth.
So walk us through, and the people watching, the selection of this cask. How does that go?
Yeah, that's a solid question. So what we'll do is we'll get multiple samples at one time. If they're from a distillery, a direct distillery selection, we'll have different ages, different cask styles, and we'll be moving through those to see what it is we are looking to represent from that distillery. If we get samples in from a broker, we'll have different distilleries represented. Maybe, you know, at max a couple of casks available from each distillery as we go through it. We'll pour them, and we always do it first thing in the morning. Joshua's youngest daughter is on a school bus by 8:30. My kids are both on the school bus by 7:40. So by about 9, we'll sit down with our samples in front of us. We do a nose test for every single sample before we ever taste it. There's no point wearing out our palates when we're making selections that we're going to spend money on. When if it doesn't pass the nose test, there's no point, you know, putting the wear and tear on your palate, which is always a very fancy way to say I can cut down on my day drinking. So we do the nose test. If it fails it, we just push it away. If it passes it, we then move on to see. There's two things we're looking for once we get to putting onto the palate. On one hand, we're looking for a common thread to run through the sample. So the notes that you get on the nose, we're looking for some representation of that on the palate. If some new qualities come in, that's great. That's a nice developing whiskey. It's a nice developing experience. If something completely comes from left field and those things on the nose completely disappear, then we've lost our thread. And we're probably not going to select that cask. But assuming that the thread runs through it from nose to palate to finish, we'll then be looking for the texture on it as well. So the mouthfeel is one part of our category selection as well. You know, is it oily? Is it astringent? Is it delivering flavors? Is it thin, as Joshua just said a moment ago? And then along with having it in the mouth is how does it deliver the alcohol? So 58.1% on this. I'd be surprised if I was tasting this blind with someone. I'd be surprised to hear that it was 58.1. I think the alcohol drinks much easier than one would imagine a 58% whiskey drinking.
Yeah, I think one of the common things that we, or at least what I think, you know, when I look at a whiskey that's 58.1 and it's not blowing my palate out, or the alcohol isn't, you know, destroying me, you know, I usually think, you know, this whiskey's holding its alcohol well. There's enough oil there that's balancing out that big alcohol hit. And
I think when you get that nice mouth, that nice oily quality in the mouth, that holds the alcohol really well also.
This has a long finish. The couple sips that I've taken, it's still hanging in there. And like you say, that oily the oily part of it has really soaked in.
Yeah.
I've added a couple drops of water, and I think it's really kind of opened it up as well and brought out some caramels and more vanillas that's in there with it.
Do you get a building dark chocolate towards the back of the finish?
That could be some, in there with the caramels, yeah.
Because that's the nice development for me from that big malty start on the nose through that nice oily citrus quality on the palate into that drying dark chocolate in the back of the finish. For me, that's the thread that runs through it. And then there are, the qualities that remain the same. Like the malt is still there when it gets to your palate, but that citrus really starts to take the focus. I think it tells a wonderful story. That's one of the things I say in all of my tastings. Every single cask is looking to tell you a story, and you're going to use your eyes and your palate and your nose to hear what that story is. And so I'm always paying attention to the cask. It's why, we've never chill filtered, we've never diluted. It's on the consumer to add a drop of water for their own tasting experience. For us, does it handle its alcohol as it comes from the cask? That's the question that we want answered. Yeah, very happy with it. This was one of my favorites from the first retail release.
Yeah.
We had one question that come in. Claire the Third was asking, they don't see this on your website.
Correct. I'm so happy that Claire brings this up. Such a good question. Josh, you want to take that?
Yeah. So as we mentioned before, when we started the company, it was with the idea that everything we bottle be sold through our website. And that rang true all the way through to December 31st, 2016. Come February of this year, we actually brought in 6 single casks that were for retail shelves that would never show up on our website. So we bottle some casks specifically for our website and some casks specifically for retail shelves. And right now, all of our retail bottlings, they're in California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey. And so, Claire, that's why you're not seeing this on our website right now, because we really want to keep them separate. We don't want to steal sales from the retailers that support our bottlings.
Claire is in Wisconsin. Where's the closest place to him selling it?
All right. So depending on where in Wisconsin Claire is, we're in not every single, but we're in pretty much all of the bigger Benny shops. If you go to Chicago, Warehouse Liquors definitely has us. Independent Spirits has us. House of Gluns, a few others.
That's good. I have a brother in Chicago. He may be taking a trip for me.
Nice.
Now, address though real quick. Originally, you guys were like, and I don't know if you want the comparison, but the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, where you were a membership to buy the bottles. You guys have since gotten rid of that, though. No membership is required, and anybody can come to your website and order.
Yep, exactly correct. Again, it was just part of that building that community. Our founding members are very special to us. They managed to pump a decent amount of money into the company for us, allowed us to do what we continue to do to this day and even build upon. And so when we made the decision last December to move away from that paid membership model, we put it in front of our membership first. They were the very first people to hear about this. And the number, and we were nervous, right? People had paid good money to be members of this. They paid annual renewal fees. And we were a little bit nervous about telling them we're now doing away with that. And when we broke the news to membership, all of the emails that came back were incredibly positive. Yeah. And people were so pleased that they had played a role in growing this company. And us launching an additional retail line was as exciting to them as it was to us. And honestly, that just meant the world to us. When I mentioned earlier, here's us. We started out to create a community, a community around whiskey. And then as we expanded, that community said to us, job well done, really proud of you. Go forth and crush retail. Was really, really magnificent. And now since being in retail, a number of our members have asked that question, just like Scott asked a moment ago. Well, where can we find it? How can we get it? How can we buy it? How can we continue to support you? Which has been magnificent. And now how we talk about the online realm is we talk about that as a special projects division. Mm-hmm. So now we envision people finding us in liquor stores, retail stores, liking what we're putting on shelves, and then going to find out more about us, then finding that we've got this online offering that is just something off the beaten path. Mm. And so we're very aware of how we select for the two different locations, the retail and the online special projects division. And so, for example, and I know we'll move on to it in just a second, but the English Whisky Company being in Sauternes gave us a chance to champion that distillery to our online membership, instead of just letting that go out to a retail store and hoping that somebody would stumble upon it or a store owner would do a good job of selling it to their customers. Here's us saying, okay, special projects division, we've got something from England, from Norfolk, the English Whisky Company. There's Sauternes going on here, which Josh is always fond of Sauternes and maturation. And so it was really an opportunity to say to our members, here's something real special. And now we've got a couple of things coming this January that are going to be maybe not even more special, but as special as a reward for that online membership.
Can I be honorary, but just I want the title of Vice President of Special Operations Division.
One of the things we're always doing, we're always trying to have fun with our names, right? We have the Jubilee with a J-E-W in it. Special projects division. I want a badge that fits inside my wallet that I can just open to people at distilleries and say, Jason Johnson Yellen, special projects division.
Yeah, we can help you with that.
Well, I'd like to say Bart is a peat head. I'm a sherry head. And this is a beautiful drink. It really is. As we've sat here over time, and I said at first there was a slight sherry presence. I mean, it's really with water and time. It's very present now. I mean, it's very obvious the sherry presence that's in this drink. Just good. It's good. I mean, it's buttery, it's creamy, smooth, and delicious.
Cheers,
man.
Yeah, thanks very much for those words. I appreciate that.
One thing.
Good job on that cask.
Cheers.
I know we're getting ready to move on, but I was kind of checking some, looking into you guys a little bit. I found this cool past interview where when you guys were bloggers, there was a point where you talked about how you thought you might run out of samples at some point, and those samples are basically still there. And we had I started laughing because when we started, Scott and I were like, well, as a YouTube channel, I don't know if, how long will we be able to sample Scotch is where we started. And we thought maybe a year. And the world just, as we dove deeper, it's like, hey, this just keeps going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's mental, isn't it?
It's beautifully mental. Yeah.
Yeah. There was definitely a time early on when, if blogging was my life and samples were, was what kept me going. I felt like I was living paycheck to paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
A question came in from Tom R. on, do you guys have any plans for any Pedro Jimenez finished bottles?
Right.
We have plans, Tom, for Pedro Jimenez full maturation bottles. And I suggest joining Single Cast Nation immediately so that you're part of that fun release. We've been talking on our podcast, One Nation Under Whiskey, about this one particular bottling for quite a few months now, and our membership is frothing over its impending release. And it's funny because just over your left shoulder, Bart, I've seen that you've got the English Whisky Company there. You're also somewhat prescient, where you've also got Port Charlotte beside it.
Yes.
And so we currently have bottled in Scotland a 14-year-old Port Charlotte that spent all 14 years in a first fill PX hoggy.
Oh,
So, Jason, I need to correct the living hell out of you right now. Because it's not PX, it's Oloroso.
Oh,
Is it Oloroso?
It is Oloroso. See, and this is why I'm the president and he's the vice president.
that's just like me and Bart.
yeah.
I got to correct him all the time.
That is, yeah.
But tell me this, chaps. Which one of us had the better story? That's
Damn,
the question.
that's how it works with us too.
That's the
how-
Damn it.
Sorry about that, Tom.
Hey, I did forget earlier. Malted in Montreal. He's another whiskey tuber.
Oh, cool.
He's asked about Canada, if you're available there or plans.
Right. So there are a couple things that can be done. I'm not sure where in Canada he is, but we are in
Montreal,
Alberta.
Scott just said.
Oh, did you say
you say
Montreal?
Montreal,
I'm
Scott?
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So that's right out then.
That's how you get back at being corrected on the sherry maturation.
You guys are just like us.
The screen froze. I'm gonna. But we actually have a bunch of people in Canada that have family in the U.S. and so we ship to their family in the U.S. and somehow those bottles get muled up north. And so we can ship to nearly any.
We call it
address in the US.
interstate commerce.
There you go.
So if there's a U.S. address, we can make.
Yeah, the other thing that we have had, and for the last couple of years, we expanded Single Cask Nation into Alberta. Any Canadian will tell you Alberta is the Wild West of whiskey sales for all of Canada. And so we put ourselves into Alberta. Not as easy to say as I first imagined. And so we've been there for a couple of years now, and there's a few stores in Lethbridge, of all places, Calgary and Edmonton, who have carried us and supported us. And so they sometimes ship, but that's not. So what do we have in PX, Joshy? We did an undisclosed 6-year-old South Shore Isla that was neither Ardbeg nor Lefroy, that sold out in 2 hours a couple of years ago.
Well, that was from a distillery that rhymed with Schmagishmullen.
It did rhyme with Schmagishmullen, and was neither Ardbeg nor Lefroy. We cannot tell you which distillery it was. So hopefully everyone will understand that.
And then we had, and this was probably in 2013, a Dalmore that was 11 and a half years, just about 11 years in bourbon, and then its final 10 months or so. So it was just over 12 years old. Its final 10 months or so in first fill PX, and the juice was darker than you'd ever believe. The PX worked magic on that whiskey. But those were the only 2 PX whiskeys that we've done, Jason, and we continue to look for them, but I think some of the problem with the PX, there's just not a lot of PX matured whiskey out there, at least when we're buying from distilleries or if we're buying from cask brokers. There's just not a lot out there.
Now I snuck ahead of you guys to this English Whisky Company, and I literally just muttered, "Oh my."
Well, I'm still thinking about the 14-year Port Charlotte and Oloroso sherry casks. So I got hung up there.
Yeah, that's going to be awfully good. And to show
there's a bottle of that coming to Wichita, Kansas. That's all I can tell.
That's what I like to hear. To show Claire, who was asking the question here, so what we've done is the bottle here, this Glentauchers that we tasted, that's our retail livery. And so you can always expect, when you see that label, you knew it came from a retail store. This is our new livery for the online side of things. And so that's the new style that you'll start to see,
Yeah.
but they're both full wraparound labels. So,
and then our old livery looks like this, where you've
go.
got, label in the front, label in the back. So this is what it used to look like. The new darker labels will be our new online stuff.
Yeah. So a clear designation between the two lines.
Great color, and again, just touch on that. This is a 9-year. It's the old English Whisky Company. 9 years old, bottled in first fill Sauternes Barriques, bottled at 61.8%.
Wow.
Yeah. Jason was not joking. Any whiskey that says it's matured at any time of its life in Sauternes, and I'm a total sucker. And so we actually received 3 different sets of samples from English Whisky Company, and probably 4 to 5 cask samples each time. And we're pretty picky. The casks that they sent us were good casks, but I think that they were good if they were part of a larger overall bottling. When you have a standard release, like Scott, before you had some Glenfiddich in your glass, and the standard 12-year-old, you've got hundreds of casks to make that whiskey, to ensure that from nose to palate to finish, it's a good whiskey. And when it comes to single casks, you have one cask, that has to do all of the heavy lifting for what, the other casks would do. So finding a solid cask that's great from nose to palate to finish is kind of difficult. And when we received our final samples of casks from English Whisky Company, there was this one Sauternes one, and I was afraid that my love for Sauternes matured whiskeys would just take over and make it completely biased. But even Jason fell in love, so that was a good thing.
I did, and unlike what we were describing earlier about the process, we first tasted this sample in a hotel room in Seattle, and just that very quick little slug from the sample bottle had us saying, "Ooh, let's explore this further."
I'm glad that's where you went. I was about to remind you that this is a family show. When you started with the hotel room story.
Yeah, let me kill the guy. But
Wow.
Give away our secret.
But I'm trying to think of other Sauternes finished. I know, I know like the Dalmore King Alexander, at least part of it is, I believe, Sauternes. But I'm trying to think if there's any Sauternes only finished.
So you've got a few. You've got
this Kilhoman here was full maturation in Sauternes.
Yeah, so I was going to say that you've got the Kilhoman Sauternes. That was a one-off though. That wasn't continuously.
Yeah, just an annual release
thing. You've got Glenmorangie Nectar d'Or, which is 12 years, so 10 years bourbon, 2 years Sauternes.
Okay, yeah, and we've never done that one, right?
You should.
Yeah,
it's good.
Worth investigating.
Good.
Yep.
If you're going to drink Glenmorangie, Nectar d'Or is not a bad one to drink.
Now I've heard though the Sauternes casks. I mean, they can quickly turn a whiskey bad or good. If you know, I mean, there's almost like there's more bad Sauternes casks that wouldn't work out compared to good Sauternes casks. I don't know.
Yeah. So when it comes to Sauternes, first and foremost, you're looking at a different kind of wood. You're looking at French oak. And there's a big difference between your run-of-the-mill Sauternes and Grand Cru. And, your Grand Cru, that's your like Chateau d'Yquem, the highest end stuff. High-end Sauternes casks are going to help mature. Good Sauternes makes good whiskey. And in this case, we know for sure that it was a Grand Cru cask. Now, they won't tell us if it was Chateau d'Yquem, which is the Sauternes of Sauternes, but I'm kind of guessing it is. Usually when someone says, "Oh, this is Grand Cru," then that's code for this is a Chateau de Chem cask.
Okay, nice, good.
It certainly has all that richness that you'd expect.
Oh yeah. All right,
Yeah,
I get a beautiful nose, but I've got an odd question and I always just trust my nose wherever it goes, but I get a sweetness that reminds me of like a bazooka bubble gum, just a beautiful sweetness wrap.
I think that checks out.
Well, I was trying to place it outside of like a almost, I didn't want to say cognac, but kind of a different grapish, winish sweetness.
Huh.
What do you guys have on your nose?
See, I always go for that. There's this, mixture of apricot jam and toasted walnuts.
Wow.
That's where my nose goes on it.
Get a nut in there as well.
Yeah, the nuttiness for sure. I think if we hadn't started with the Glentauchers, we might have got more maltiness on the English Whisky Company, but the maltiness there is nothing compared to the Glentauchers before it. But I think it's in there a little bit. But I like your use of the nutty.
Okay, I said the Glentauchers 8-year-old was what did I use to describe it? I said it was delicious, or it was
beautiful. I think you said.
I think you said beautiful.
Beautiful. This is beautiful times 6. Woo! Mm. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. Well, the good news on this one is it's only one click away. So this is still more than available for sale at singlecastnation.com. Joshua can correct me, but I think it's $105.
Wow.
It's around there, plus or minus $1 million.
There you go.
And flat rate of $10 shipping to your front door. So.
Yeah. What's the VAT on the $1 million?
No, you just said that a flat rate, $10 shipping. I had seen that somewhere. People are used to paying $25, $30, up to $50 shipping. You guys are $10.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're most proud of. When we started, shipping looked a lot like other people's shipping. And that was fine. That was how we had to do business. But again, as we received that support from our whiskey community, we were able to strike better deals as we went along. And so that $10 flat rate shipping really was born from the support we had of shipping whiskey to people's front doorsteps. And yeah, nothing. We've done it now since January 1 of 2016.
Yeah.
And so it's not a flash in the pan. It's not a gimmick that can't be maintained. It's the real deal. And we like nothing more at our tastings than telling people, hey, sometimes you only want to buy one bottle. $10 to your doorstep doesn't seem crazy. Sometimes you're buying 6 or 12. $10 to your doorstep seems kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And it is. And we're proud of it. And we're doing it live.
Wow.
So,
this is an explosion of white grapes, golden raisins.
Yeah, nice.
Golden raisins.
Nice malted whiskey.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we bottle primarily Scotch whiskey, but we bottle bourbons and rye and things like that as well. And English Whisky Company is a much lesser known whiskey, and it was a little risky, I think, bottle, but we've been a vacation, thankfully, for the people who are buying our stuff and reviewing our stuff, and we felt confident. We said it's a damn good whiskey, and if we sit on stock for a while, we sit on stock for a while, and people will discover it. We're fine with that, and in a way, I'm kind of glad. We released this a little earlier this year, Jason.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we have some bottlings that sell in 2 hours, and we have some that stay in our warehouse for 10 months, and we're fine with that.
Yeah,
Scott, we need like a tape delay so we can go buy this before all the fans.
You taste that yet, Bart?
Oh yeah. Oh my.
I know it.
Yeah. Cheers. Yeah, really. The other thing for me is, of course, being Scottish, the number of people that come up to me and say, English whiskey? English whiskey? And I'm like, absolutely, like power to them. Like clearly single malt is a global phenomenon now. And, you know, I can shit on the English for a whole host of things. But if they're making great whiskey at their distillery, I'll support that. I'll drink that. So, yeah, power to our English brothers and sisters.
Roger that.
Question came in from Tom. Are you bottling any rums?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any, and then I would add to that, do you have any plans to branch out?
Yeah. Jason, you want me to take this, or do you?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. We actually bottled our first rum a little bit ago. It's hitting store shelves now. It was a single cask of Spanish rum, 18 years old, molasses based, matured in a first fill bourbon barrel. It's been spending the majority of its life. Well, spent a fair amount in Spain, but it's been spending the past 10 plus years of its life in Scotland. But because of the first 8 years, it lost a ton of volume. And when it moved over to Scotland, it started losing ABV. So natural cask strength, you're looking at 49% ABV. But it is really a Scotch drinker's rum.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But we've got some other rums in the works, right, Jason?
We absolutely do. And so it's one place where you want to watch both retail line and special projects division. I'm always the one on the podcast that always speaks out of turn. I'm not sure if we have one rum coming to special projects division.
You could do it.
That could only live in a special projects division. It is mental. And I will cease.
Hey, you're talking to the vice president of special projects.
That's right. And nobody's watching. It's a secret just with us, really. There's nobody here.
That's kind of the trap that I fall into, to be honest with you. Like when I see some of my interview comments appearing in publication, I'm like, I really thought it was just me and that journalist that I was speaking to with a microphone and a pencil and a pad of paper, and I should have put two and two together. So
I'm going to throw in real quick that I'm glad that the Lafroig was broken in transit and not the 9-year English Whisky Company from Sauternes Cask. I'll sacrifice the Lafroig for that one.
Oh, you know, maybe we'll do this again and we'll just have a peated conversation.
Yes, now that is what I'm talking about.
You're talking dirty to Bart in a hotel room.
Yeah, we're in a hotel room now, brother.
No, Jason's mine.
Yeah,
Jason's all mine.
He doesn't sound like he's saying that for the first time, does he?
That's right. We'll have a little fire going that goes real well with the peat.
Now, okay, I'll point out beforehand, we were just talking, different how long, do we spend on the live streams? We're coming up on the hour mark, and I told you guys it would go quick.
We're loving it, too.
Wow, really quick.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's gone lightning fast.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add on, in terms of Tom's question there, I wanted to add on to what Joshua had said there. Yeah, we definitely have some coming. One of the things for us is we're single cask nation. We're not single cask whiskey nation. We're not single whiskey nation. We're not single malt whiskey nation. We're single cask nation. And we've said from day one, if we find something in a cask that we like, we're going to bottle it. Yeah. And so now we're starting to show our members, people who have been fans of us since 2011, 2012, that's coming to fruition. And so we've bottled some grain whiskies. We bottled a Girvan 10-year-old for the first retail release. We've now bottled a 28-year-old Cambus that was finished in Muscatel, which is incredibly insane, and it's very, very good. So we've got single grain, we've definitely got the rums coming, and we've got some other special projects in the fire as well.
What are those again?
The special projects, you'll have to speak to our vice president of special projects division. He'll fill you in off the air.
That's right, and I can't tell you anything about that, Bart.
Oh, more secrets.
Oh, you're breaking up, Josh.
Spanish rum it is. Just as sort of an interesting thing, when we purchase casks of whiskey, sometimes it's directly from distilleries, and sometimes we have to purchase from cask brokers. There are some distilleries that just say no, not just to us, but to any independent bottler. So we buy a lot from cask brokers. In this particular case, this cask of Spanish rum, we were told is from an undisclosed distillery. They couldn't tell us who it was. What they did say is that there were only 2 casks from this distillery in Scotland at that time, and they were willing to give us one of those casks. Now, I ended up finding out who the distillery was, and I'm not really supposed to talk about it, but I can hint about it, and this is what I'll say. There is a small Spanish island off the shore of Morocco. And so break out your Google Maps and look for small islands off the shore of Morocco. You'll find a rum distillery there.
Did you think somebody would be saying that to you today, Bart? Did you think your night in Wichita, Kansas would end with a small island off the Moroccan coast?
Yes, anything near the Moroccan coast, we've just gone worldly.
Can I share a little tip just as we're moving into the Whiskey Jubilee bottling?
Yes, please.
So we use these glass vino seals on our American things, and we love them. And as far as we know, we're the first people to use these vino seals on whiskeys. But one of the things our members have found is they're a bit of a pain to get open if you don't know what you're doing. If you just do it like the old cork, they kind of get wedged in a little bit. They've got a little bit of an O-ring, a plastic O-ring, so it doesn't always pop right out. And so I'm always showing people this. If you just pop it, I'm trying to move my finger out of the way there, but if you just break that little seal like that.
Yeah, just a little thumbs up.
And then it just pops right off. So the reason that I'm doing this is because I know we're going to send our members to see this video as well. And so I want them to see us doing this. So yeah, you just give it a little thumbs up, pop, and then boop, off it comes, easy peasy. If you tried to open it,
you probably heard me trying to open mine.
I did.
And I was talking to Joshua about that before we went live. When the package arrived, I could see the top of this bottle in there, and I thought, oh, something happened to the cork. And I could smell that Lafroig that had been broken. And I thought, that was whatever happened to
already.
Whatever happened to the cork, there. And then, I got to looking. I was like, well, that's one of the neatest things I've ever saw.
Yep. It's you don't realize it until you've done it that you've never once looked in through here to look at your whiskey. Yeah, you've never done it in your life.
See right there, you can see it.
There you are.
That's what we call the bung hole.
Right.
It's our glass anal plug. That's what we call it.
I call it glass holes.
Glass hole.
Glass hole.
It's great having these on a counter, on a table, or a bar top as the night goes on. I see people pick them up and do this.
No.
and nothing comes out. And they're like...
Now, real quick, though, so on your American bottles, that's what you're doing. You've also gone to on the Scott or the overseas bottlings, your English whiskey companies, your Scotch bottles, you're using a synthetic cork.
Exactly.
Tell us about that, on your decision on that real quick.
Yeah. So this actually started back in 2013 with our first Whiskey Jubilee bottling. 87 bottles. It was a single Heaven Hill cask, basically a 15-year-old Elijah Craig. And thankfully, there was a friend who called up and he shot me a text and he said, "Man, this bourbon's corked." I said, "I have no idea what that even means, but come on over and, bring the bottle and, let's see what it's like." And he brings the bottle over and he pops open the cork and I go to smell the bottle and it smelled like a moldy camping tent. Like it was just awful.
Really?
And so I said, "Here, I don't have any of this left. It's sold out in 3 hours. Here, take this." And it was like 3/4 of a bottle left. And I actually sat on that bottle I'm not physically sat on the bottle. You know?
That'll teach it.
You're back in my wheelhouse.
You know, I just put that bottle on my shelf for a couple of years, and it still smelled after that. It was terrible. Getting worked bottle, we decided we need to switch. So all of our overseas bottlings have that synthetic cork, so we don't ever deal with any corking issues. And all of our American stuff has this glass Vino seal. And so A, you'll never get corked, and B, the corks won't break too. That's another problem that can happen as well.
Yep.
So we're cool with synthetic and glass.
Wow. I love it.
Okay, so moving on to the whiskey, and you said this was from the first Whiskey Jubilee?
First Chicago Whiskey Jubilee.
Okay.
So the only Whiskey Jubilee we've never bottled for was our first New York Jubilee in 2012, because we put it together in 4 weeks. From that point on, we started asking ourselves, what can we do with our festival that is different from the other whiskey festivals in the United States? And so one of the things that we drew from was European whiskey festival tradition, which is oftentimes you'll have a festival bottling. And so we came out the gate, as Josh just talked about, that 15-year-old single cask or Heaven Hill that was glorious. And then for year 2, we started talking with David Perkins. It's funny, we actually spoke with him at Thanksgiving of 2012 as we prepared for a future bottling in 2013. Thanksgiving is a good time for us to contact people. We're actually not working on that day, so it's useful. And so we started talking to David, and David put bourbon, rye, and American light whiskey in front of us. And like a lot of drinkers, we knew bourbon, we knew rye, we'd never heard of American light whiskey. And so David Perkins, being the knowledgeable whiskey chap that he is, kind of talked us through American light whiskey a little bit. And one of the things that we really liked in our sample was this kind of orange gumdrop or this orange creamsicle note to it, and thought it was very unique. And the short story of this is American light whiskey is essentially American grain whiskey. We know Scottish grain whiskey. We know that any bottle of blend will be about 70% 3-year-old Scottish grain whiskey. But if you leave it in cask and you let it mature, it turns into something quite beautiful unto itself. Well, lo and behold, American grain whiskey or American light whiskey does something very similar. And so for that third Jubilee, which was that second festival bottling, we did a blend of bourbon, rye, and light whiskey for that bottling. We then had an empty rye cask, which we sent off to Schmaltz Brewing in New York State. And they made one of their beers, beautiful malty beer, that they then matured in that rye barrel with fresh mustard seeds. Mm. And when we then bottled that beer for the Whiskey Jubilee, we had an empty cask. So we put light whiskey into that cask. And then by the time the first Chicago Jubilee rolled around, we had, and you heard me talk about threads earlier, we had this beautiful thread running through our Whiskey Jubilee experience. And so here we have an 8-year-old American light whiskey, mature or finished in an ex-rye barrel that had formerly matured beer with fresh mustard seeds, and all bottled at 65.1% alcohol.
This is very, very unique.
Yep.
I literally thought on the nose before you was explaining it, grain and rye.
Yep.
Was what I was getting.
Yep. But there's
I didn't know. I was going to ask you for the definition of the American light whiskey.
Yeah.
I've seen that in passing and mentioned a time or two.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically what American light whiskey is. I'll give you a quick history of it. Back in the way late 60s, early 70s, people stopped drinking bourbon and vodka became the drink of choice. It became a cocktail decade, and that moved into the 80s and 90s as well. But you had a bourbon industry which was stuck, with tons of liquid they couldn't sell, but they needed to make money or shut down. And so what they decided to do was create a new category of spirit that was light enough in flavor and very easy to mix. So imagine your standard bourbon mash bill, minimum 51% corn, then you have some other grains, etc. Normally for bourbon, you're going to distill that to 62.5% alcohol and then put that into new charred oak. With light whiskey, they take that mash bill, but they distill it up to between 80% and 94.5% alcohol, so close to grain neutral, and then put that into used casks, basically ex-bourbon casks. And that became like Seagram's, right?
Yep.
Light whiskey, just a very easy drinking kind of thing. And typically it was bottled at 2 years old or something young. And it wasn't meant yet to 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. Actually, Jason, why don't you start talking, because you're holding up a light whiskey bottle.
Yeah, and so just to show you, this is a bottle of light whiskey from the 1980s. This was a gift from Bill Thomas, the owner at Jack Rose Dining Saloon in DC. And so you can see, even on the label, it was designed to be, drunk with a lot of ice. It was meant to be a mixer. And on the back of it, this little label here, this says, "This extremely light whiskey has been skillfully distilled from America's finest grains, carefully matured to produce a delicate flavor, pleasing to the taste when taken neat or as a perfect balance to mixed drinks." And then in red, it says, "This whiskey is 4 years old." So it very much puts it into that same category as Scottish grain whiskey, where a lot of it is just mass produced and meant to disappear. And light whiskey fell dead born from the womb. It did not find a following. Here we are, all whiskey drinkers in the 21st century with no idea what light whiskey is. It was a total failed experiment, but it's still made because it still goes into blends. And so we've championed single casks. We've bottled them as LDI, we've bottled them as MGP. And our members at Single Cask Nation know exactly what to expect from light whiskey, and we continue to fight the good fight in getting out the word surrounding light whiskey. And then the comment I was going to make, Bart, just as you were saying, this is very unique. People always ask me, "What do you drink of a night?" And I always say to them, this. This is what I reach for of a night, because it's, you see my shelves. I have nothing else on my shelves.
What shelves? Where?
Ignore the man in front of the shelves. Yeah, I have nothing on my shelves that tastes like this, and I passionately love it, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, I'm a huge rye fan, so I was picking up the rye, but then it had the very sweetness of that grain in there, and then, like you said, there were then several things I couldn't pin down. So when you started to explain it, I was like, and just, I mean, it was just it was surprising all the way around, and like very, very unique, as you explained. Wow.
Very astringent, really dries out the mouth.
It is dry.
Like dusty, almost like a dusty hay. A dusty field that's where the dirt is blowing. But yeah, that citrus, some of that citrus sweetness, or maybe the orange zest of a rye in there with it. It's very, very intriguing.
Yeah, for me, the maltiness, the malty sweetness from the beer meets the orange creamsicle quality of the light whiskey, which meets the citrus quality of the hop oils. And that's the thread that I go through this whiskey on.
Some of it that I'm getting is the hops. It's the hops of the beer. Yep.
Yeah, that's right in the tail end for me. That is
adding a little bit of a twinge in there with it. Yeah.
Yep. I had a friend visiting, and I poured him the beer that we bottled with this, and then I poured him a dram of this, and so he was drinking the beer, doing the what do you guys call it over here? The what we call it, half and half in Scotland. I know you don't call it half and half over here. What do you call when you do a beer next to a spirit? You drink them both simultaneously.
Like a chaser?
The chaser's part of it, but there's a name that all the hipsters are using.
Oh.
Come on, Joshy. You're going to let me down on
You're going to
let me down on here.
Being a hipster?
Look at the hat you're wearing. How could you not? All you're missing is the handlebar mustache.
Shut up and continue your story.
So,
Baby hiding a man bun.
So what we found was, as you
Boilermaker. Someone just said Boilermaker.
Boilermaker.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is why we have the hive mind. So consuming this in Boilermaker form, my friend said, this is the future. All whiskeys should have an accompanying beer, and they should always be drunk together. And he said, you guys have cracked it. You need to do this more. And the biggest problem with that is it takes a ton of work. It's already difficult to get out as many single casks as we need to get out in a year. Trying to partner beers with our single casks, that would be even more mental than putting together a whiskey festival in 4 weeks.
Oh, yeah, that is logistical there.
Yeah, that would be. Josh has gone silent on this because he has no interest in this idea.
I think I can see him rocking.
I'm just drinking whiskey. I'm listening, shutting my eyes, listening to your Scottish accent.
So this bottling is from the first Jubilee in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a freebie to the first so many people that showed up? Was it
no?
You could only purchase it there.
I don't know if you've picked up on this, Scott, but I'm Scottish, and so I will not be giving away free things. That's not how this works.
The festival bottle that we work at is, if you're able to come to one of our festivals, we tell everybody, make a beeline to the Single Cask Nation table, taste the Jubilee Festival bottling. If you like it, put your name down, and the next day we will send out a hidden URL, and you'll be able to purchase it. And if you don't like the bottling, put your name down. We'll send you the secret URL, and then you can sell it on the secondary market and pay your mortgage off.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to pull it over because we've been talking about it so much. Give me 1 second.
So, so secondary market, then what is this bottle going for?
So that one actually doesn't go for a whole heck of a lot. I've seen that one go for about $300, but our very first festival bottling, the Heaven Hill, I've seen that go for $3,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was the very first one.
So you should. You got to talk for it to show you, Jason.
Okay. So this is our very first one. This is our hero, who's been on every one of our labels. There's the information, just what we pointed out. Very simple label, nicely put together. And I will confirm that it is unopened.
We're gonna, as the vice president of special projects, we're gonna need that bottle.
My absolute pleasure. If you can deposit $3,000, I will make sure that you have this by next week.
I'll have to substitute some of my shares that I was given in the company.
You'll trade him in.
Yeah, no, the story that we keep talking about. So, we've seen people trading Pappy for our Heaven Hill bottle. And we always say the person getting the Heaven Hill bottle is getting a much better deal there. Thank you. 15's a good number, right? I like the Pappy 15. After that, I don't know why people are spending the money.
What was the specifics on that one? The age and the ABV?
15 years, 61.3% alcohol. I can't remember location in the warehouse. We didn't put it on the bottle. Do you remember location in the warehouse, Josh?
Yeah, it was on the 7th floor. So we had gotten samples of the 5th floor, the 7th floor, and the 9th floor. And the 9th floor one, the ABV on that was 88% alcohol. And there was probably about 35, 40 bottles in there, and it was damn good, but
it didn't have the finish that we wanted. but it was better on the palate than you'd imagine at that high ABV. So the first bottling has kind of taken on a legend of its own, but even as recently as last June, for New York, we bottled a single cask Wild Turkey. And in homage to our friends at Wild Turkey, we sold that for $101 on the night. So single cask, 9 years old, warehouse.
Warehouse. Oh, I want to say.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah, I've got it right behind me as well. And so yeah, we sold it out 2 days on that one. Sold it out, nice outturn on it, and within 9 months, we saw that go on the secondary for $815.
Wow.
And so that's the joke that Joshua is making. You know, you taste it. If you like it, sign up. If you don't like it, sign up. So far, everybody's liked it, so we're okay on that front.
Yeah, well, you've got to take that as a good sign, though. I mean, if people are paying that much for your whiskey.
But here's my problem: is that secondary market would mean nothing. I would be consuming.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh.
No, my wife's take is each time I tell her what's happening on the secondary market, she says, "And how much of that money do we see?" And I say, "None at all." And she says, "Why are you telling me?"
Well, whoever's selling on the secondary market, they're just losing out. I mean,
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Every time we find an open bottle of our Heaven Hill in the wild, we take photos of it, and people invariably pour it for us, which is very kind of them. But it's great seeing open bottles of it. Says the guy with an unopened bottle.
How many bottles of it were there?
87. 87.
Wow, is that all? Huh.
That was it. And I know that because it was the first one, nobody knew what we were doing. Sure. And so people who got it were like, "Oh, it's a 15-year-old single cask Heaven Hill. Let me taste it." And so a ton of people opened their bottles and consumed them.
I mean, when we did our first show, nobody knew us, and we still got Bart's socks that he was wearing.
You should see what they go for on the secondary market.
Buy it now.
Oh, people be putting them on their hands, and you don't put those on your feet.
I always thought people in Kansas did put socks on their hands.
Yes, it's one of the rules. Any kind of gunfight, you got to have socks on your hands.
Wichita Men's, isn't that what it's called?
Yeah. Those are the mitts.
I had a guy. I was pouring this bottling at our first Whiskey Jubilee Seattle, just for the fun of kind of showing people kind of what we do in other cities. And there was a guy with no sense of irony or humor at all, just looked at it and said, 65.1, that's toxic. It's like, no, you're gonna be okay. He was like, no, I can't drink that. Nobody should drink that. I was like, it's gonna be okay, dude. Calm down.
Yeah, we would have had to escort him out of the building.
Yeah, that's a 65.1. It's high. It's not that high. Right?
He needed you had to have a little safe room closet for those people. Here you go. He's been triggered by the high ABV. We got another one, John.
Yeah, people are weird. You learn.
So Jason, you've got an unopened bottle from that first edition Heaven Hill there. Joshua, the same?
I do indeed.
There you go.
Let's open it right now. Let's just open it. Let's just do it.
And then we have one for our archive as well. We always archive one bottle of everything we do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Bart. You're pretty awesome yourself.
Well, thanks. We've got a great fan, Roy Duff. He's actually Glasgow, Scotland. Big fan of the show. Great deep stuff. Man, I wish you guys could get a hold of some of these independent bottlings in Scotland, but I know you guys just can't find them. And and just with you guys being here and us being able to even taste some of your independent bottlings, I see exactly what he's saying. Just the way you guys, the expertise that comes through.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we've said from the very beginning is that we're independent bottlers in the Scottish tradition. America itself has an independent bottling tradition, but the deal has always been a distiller will sell you casks, and then you brand it yourself. Tell your own story. right? Fred Minnick's book explored that in depth. And that's kind of how the industry built over here. But in Scotland, there was still a case of your distillery name could appear on somebody else's completely differently branded bottle. And I remember when I first got into whiskey, I always thought, well, you would want to drink direct from the distillery. If I like Laphroaig, I would purchase from Laphroaig. Why would I want to buy these fake Rolexes being sold by independent bottlers? And it took me a few years of realizing the distillery has key elements, key messaging for fans of that distillery. There's a key style that they want their distillery to fit. Whereas an independent bottler, when they come along selecting just a good example of a cask from that distillery, I've always said the independent bottler is giving you a peek behind the curtain. And the peek behind the curtain doesn't mean nearly as much if you don't know the distillery. And knowing the distillery doesn't mean as much if you haven't had a peek behind the curtain. So I never disparage any distillery bottlings. They're a vital part of our education, but we can work in tandem. And we can have distillers putting out their style that tells their story, and independent bottlers enriching that experience for whiskey lovers. And in Scotland, we've known that for a long time. Throughout Europe, they've known that for a long time. In America, we have spent the last 6 years informing American whiskey drinkers what is possible. And so for you chaps to have us on and make that exact point, Bart, is brilliant, means the world to us. And hopefully folk will come along and enjoy that journey with Single Cask Nation, trust our palates, trust our selections, and see what peaks we're offering behind the curtain.
Hear, hear.
Well, yeah, and thank you. Well, first I say thanks to Ben, Single Malt Alliance,
Yes,
who kind of arranged this. He hooked you up with us up with you, and the bottles that you've sent. Okay, let's talk. Look at an 8-year Glentauchers.
Yep.
9-year English Whisky Company.
Yep.
8-year American Light Whiskey. All beautiful. Now, my favorite is the English Whisky Company, and Bart will have to search my house to find this bottle.
You give me the other. Yeah. Well. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, very, very well done. We haven't had any of your offerings at all before, so it was very nice to have a sample. And I'll tell you, admittedly,
about to change.
Do what, Bart?
It's about to change.
That's changing, baby. I'm headed to the website. I'm telling you, we got to go tape delay.
Well, and I'll tell you, admittedly, okay, preconceived notions when you sent them, and I saw an 8-year Glentauchers, a 9-year English Whisky Company, 8-year, well, and an 8-year American Light Whiskey. To me, 8 years is pretty well aged, but I'm thinking, well, these are younger whiskeys. I kind of had low expectations. Let's see what happens here, and just blown away. The Glentauchers became an outstanding with time and some water. Even the sherry notes in it really blossomed.
I'm back to it now. Wow.
Yeah. And the 9-year English Whisky Company from a Sauternes cask is just beautiful up front throughout. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. It's wonderful to hear, because when we first launched, we were committed to age statements. And so we bottled a 4-year-old single cask Kilchoman, and people would say to us, that's a bit young. Oh, could you imagine what that'd be like at 8? And we'd say, well, why don't you try it at 4? And then people would try and go, oh, that's good. That's really good. And then when we bottled a single cask from Amrut in India, they had said, are you sure you want to put the number on this? And we said, absolutely. And we bottled a 5-year-old Amrut. And the thing for us is, as much as we were focused on building community, we, as Joshua said, we came from that blogging background. We had been in the educational realm of whiskey. And so we never wanted to hide our age statements. We instead wanted to get ahead of the story and tell people, why did we bottle a 4-year-old Kilchoman? why did we bottle a 5-year-old Amrut? We took a Westland here from Seattle, an amazing single malt producer in America, and we bottled a 2-year-old single cask, single malt from them. And people keep saying like 2, and we're like, just taste it. Like that's the key that unlocks all of this. Just taste it. People love it. Love it.
I got to tell you, I was looking and I saw that 5-year Lafroig, and Scott knows I love a peat punch in the face, and I was immediately like, yes, be a strong. Tell me just a little bit about that 5-year Lafroig.
Josh, I've talked a lot. Do you want to tell him?
Wow, I think you were on a roll. I didn't know if you'd ever end, but
really I'm happy to keep going. I'm having a brilliant time.
Well, see, you guys, everybody knows in Seinfeld when when there was the Bizarro world, there was the George and the Jerry and the Kramer. You guys are me and Bart opposite.
Yeah, that's it.
Jason is the Bart. I think Joshua and me are about the same.
I think
we all hang out. If we all hang out,
we get to talk.
Yeah, if we all get in the same location, there's going to be like a seismic shift or something.
Oh yeah, it's like matter and antimatter. Just a massive.
This is all a massive setup. If you ever listen to the podcast, Joshua is the chatty Cathy, and I'm the one fighting for the word in edgewise. So he's setting you all up tonight. Don't believe the hype.
Can I talk now, Jason?
Yeah, go ahead. Lafroig 5, I think, is where we're at.
So the Lafroig 5, one of the beautiful things about Lafroig 8 years and under, it retains this beautiful charred oak note that's unmistakable. And at 5 years, this one had this sort of bright peppery kick to it, but all that coastal brininess just shined through. The malt came through. It's sort of an interesting thing. We were told by the broker who we purchased it from, because we didn't get it from Lafroig. We said, this is a refill cask. But if you look at the juice itself, is that what you just poured, Jason?
I did.
And so show them the juice. Yeah, there we go.
So this is our old style online label. This is the discontinued label now.
Show them the color of the whiskey.
I will.
Boop. So 5 years old. Jason, you have to talk to make it work.
Okay, I'm talking to show you the color of the whiskey. There you go. Can you see the color of the whiskey, everybody?
At 5 years old, it's about the color of a 12-year-old. So that cask was working overtime to impart just...
I think the bottle does a better job of showing that color. Having it in the glass doesn't quite do it, but there's the bottle.
No, I thought in the bottle it looked darker than it for 5 years.
Yeah. For that refill bourbon, that's an awfully good color. That's a cask working hard.
So it's if you like Lafroig and you like a peaty punch in the face, that's going to do it and then some.
Yeah, the thing with both our 6-year-old and our 5-year-old Lafroigs is they've been very coastal and very fresh. Yeah. And so for people who like the heavier, diesel-y, gasoline Lafroigs, it's not that. This I think exemplifies that peak behind the curtain that I was talking about, where it's fresh sea salt and coastal, campfire on a beach kind of thing. Yeah. I just thought I would pick up the mantle from Scott and just torture Bart as much as possible.
Oh, you're
totally inspired by Scott.
Yeah, he'll bring over that box and he'll probably just leave it on my doorstep tomorrow morning. I'll be like, "What is this?" I'll smell it from bed and I'll be like, "What? There's peat somewhere." What?
Yeah. Little do you know, Scott actually got that sample intact. Took a hammer to it and said, "This will show Bart."
Yeah, he's like, "I'm going to pay it back right now."
No, I took it and I poured it in another container, and then I broke the empty one. I don't know what happened to it. It happens,
Oh, there's a little almond on the Lafroig 5, actually. I haven't had that before. That's a nice little wrinkle.
Question just came up. What we were tasting? Somebody Santa Cruzan came in. We started. These were all so Single Cask Nation, independent bottler. The first one we started with was a Glentauchers 8-year-old second fill sherry cask.
Malty goodness.
At 58.1%.
Malty.
And
That's
we
it
moved,
right there. Since you only got the sample, there's the bottle right there. Thank you.
Yes, and a beautiful malty lemongrass, light sherry on the nose, thyme, and a little bit of water. To me, really brought up the sherry. Then became more on the forefront with it. It was buttery, creamy, really smooth, well done addition. Then we moved to the English Whisky Company. It's a 9-year-old from a Sauternes Barriques, bottled at 61.8%. And again, just a wonderful, wonderful whiskey.
Headed to my house.
Yeah, I don't
hopefully with a
bottle.
Lafroig 5 chaser.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get some Lafroig 5, Scott, or I'm taking that at gunpoint from your house.
The third bottle we tasted from the Single Cask Nation is from the first Jubilee that they hosted in Chicago.
Yep.
And it was an American light whiskey, 8 years old, finished in a beer barrel. They put on the label as distilled at Midwest Grain Products, MGP. And it was bottled at 65.1%. And I think that's the first light whiskey that I've had.
Very unique, very
unique, and really good, really delicious,
very tasty.
Yeah, the whole kind of the whole idea with the MGP LDI kind of disclosure was it was exactly like I said a few moments ago. Being that we're in the Scottish tradition, we didn't want to hide that it was MGP or hide that it was LDI. It was like, here's the distillery producing the fantastic juice. We're independent bottlers. Our job is to select good juice that you can spend your money on. You should know where the distillery was. And I remember somebody in the industry had come by my table at the Jubilee and said, the balls on you guys. Like he just loved the fact that we were disclosing LDI/MGP. And we were like, why would we do it any other way?
Oh, yeah. MGP puts out some really good stuff.
Right.
I have great rise from them.
Right. Yeah. So we were proud to really take ownership of that, the distillery. So,
Well done.
Yeah. Cheers. Cheers.
Well, hey, let's wrap it up. We've gone through our bottles. We're actually an hour and 34 minutes into our live stream.
Feels like 45. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you for having us on as well. This is magnificent. A ton of fun. You're both cool cats. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thanks to you, Jason, and Joshua, you as well. Owners, co-founders, operators of Single Cask Nation. Give a little spiel. Just give the Cliff Notes version, where to find you, website, a blog post. Give the people watching everything they need to know to find you.
Yeah, I could do this, Jason, if you wouldn't mind. You can find all of our online bottlings at singlecasknation.com. So pretty easy. That's where all of our special project division whiskey is. And if you want some of our retail stuff, it's distributed in California, Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey. And there are some shops, like in California, they definitely will ship to many states. If you check out, say, Whiskey Shop in San Francisco, they'll ship around. And for the Canadians there, if you've got a U.S. address, we can ship to a U.S. address. The other thing you'd want to look at is whiskeyjubilee.com, and that's Jubilee spelled the fun way with a Jew. And those are our 3 festivals.
New York, Chicago, Seattle.
New York, Chicago, Seattle. WhiskeyGeekTours.com. That's our tour company of Scotland and Scottish distilleries. We really don't pay attention to castles or standing stones or sheep or anything like that. We really focus on.
Speak for yourself. I'll always pay attention to a good sheep. So we're talking to
I was interested until the sheep were out.
I know. I've tried to beat that out of them, but I just can't.
Wool was in.
And the last thing I'll point out is just our podcast, which is One Nation Under Whiskey. and whiskey is always spelled without an E when it comes to our stuff. So onenationunderwhiskey.com, and you can find our website there and any podcasting application on your phone or computer, and you'll find us.
All right, now you guys are you're gonna. I mean, you're already huge. What you've got here is unbelievably good.
Thank you.
Cheers, man. Cheers.
Unbelievably good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cheers. That's very kind. Thank you.
Oh, I wish I was in New York, Seattle, or Chicago. I may have to visit my brother and say, "Get the basement ready." Scott and I are coming over.
There you go. Yeah. No. He was in Chicago, right? November 8th of 2018 is the Chicago Jubilee.
That may happen. Oh, that may happen. I want to have a dram with you guys.
Well, we'd love to have you.
Oh.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Ben, Single Malt Alliance, for setting it up.
Yep.
It was great to just get some insight from you guys on, selection of the casks, the bottlings, getting stuff out there, getting the samples, going through those, everything that you guys have done. Great information. Great comments were coming in from everybody that watched. Thanks to everybody that tuned in. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks to everybody that watched either live or recorded. Time delay, as Bart keeps
time delay. Thank you. Yeah.
And as a vice president of special projects, I think we need to close this out. Bart, Bart, go.
All right, we're gonna Scotch it. You Scotch gods.
Cilantro, dummies.
Cilantro Lakaim.
Cilantro Tove.